My parents covered my sister's college tuition, but said I didn't deserve the same help. We graduated together anyway, and when they showed up to the ceremony, the color drained from their faces. My name is Rachel Moore. I was born 4 minutes after my sister, Hannah, and, apparently, those 4 minutes made all the difference in the eyes of my parents, Charles and Elizabeth Moore. Hannah and I are twins, but to them, it seemed there was only one real daughter, and, alas, it wasn't me. From my earliest childhood, I noticed the difference in how they treated me. Hannah always got the newest, prettiest, and most desirable things. She got the dolls, and I got the ones the neighbors' children gave me. She got the dresses, and I got the ones that were already worn. When Hannah cried, my mother dropped everything and flew to comfort her, hug her, and persuade her. When I tripped and scraped my knee, all I heard was, "You're a strong girl. Rachel, be patient." I was given a paper napkin and sent off to play again. As a child, I began to understand that in order to be noticed, I had to do something extraordinary. After all, no one noticed my tears for no reason. I remember one of the most vivid episodes from that time. I was about 5 years old. Hannah and I were playing in the yard. She wanted to climb up some tall metal structure on the playground, but she got scared and started crying. I was scared myself, but I climbed up and jumped off anyway to show her that it was okay. I hoped that my parents would praise my courage, but Dad ran up to us, first hugged Hannah, and told her that she was a brave girl, although he didn't even try to climb up, and he glanced at me and just quietly muttered, "Be careful, Rachel. You know you can hurt yourself," and that was it. No pride in me, no approval. Perhaps this became the model of our relationship for many years to come. The more I tried to prove that I deserved attention, the more indifferent they became, but Hannah could smile, do some insignificant thing, and my parents would immediately shower me with praise. I carefully hid my jealousy. It is difficult for a child to understand why he gets less love. I cried at night, hugging the shabby teddy bear that my grandmother gave me. My grandmother was the only one who always looked at me with warmth. She lived in another city, so we rarely saw each other. But every time she visited, I was bathed in the warmth that, alas, my mom and dad could not give me. When we went to school, everything became even more noticeable. Hannah was always praised for her efforts. For example, she had a craft made of cardboard and paper, quite ordinary, with many flaws. But my mother shouted, "This is just a masterpiece, Hannah. How did you do it so beautifully? Oh, you're so clever." At the same time, I had my first successes in writing. I received certificates in drawing competitions, wrote short stories for which my teachers noted me. But at home, this only caused a cold reaction. "Well, yes, well done, Rachel. But watch out, don't get cocky." I heard some kind of tension in these words, as if my mother did not even want to admit that I was capable of success without their support. I studied hard, avoiding complaints and showy whining because I realized it was useless. One day, when I was about 10, Hannah and I brought in our report cards. I had straight A's, and she had a couple of good grades between the C's and B's. My parents, looking at my A's, just nodded. "Well, you're a smart girl. It's clear." And looking at Hannah's report card, they exclaimed, "Wow, 3 B's, great. Hannah, we're proud of you." I remember how my heart sank. It seemed as if the award for my hard work had been given to someone else. And this happened over and over again. The older we got, the more obvious the gap in our family became. My parents believed that Hannah needed their attention. She was more sensitive, more tender, more vulnerable. And I, in their opinion, can stand up for myself. You'll figure it out yourself, you'll find a way out yourself, and so on in the same spirit. At some point, I resigned myself to the fact that I wouldn't have much support from my parents. But resigning myself doesn't mean giving up. On the contrary, it pushed me forward every time, even more stubbornly, constantly proving not so much to them as to myself that I'm worth something. When Hannah and I were finally approaching graduation, the question of choosing a college arose. We both decided to study accounting. It turned out to be an amazing coincidence. This interest in numbers, finances, and reporting was awakened in me because I loved order and precision. In Hannah, I never noticed any particular desire for such sciences, but she said, "Well, this is a popular profession, and then we'll see." My parents took this very seriously. They paid for her education in full and at once so that Hannah doesn't have to worry about anything during her studies. Let her focus on her studies. And to me, As soon as the conversation turned to money for education, they said, "You're smart, Rachel. You can probably get a grant and earn some extra money if necessary. You won't be lost." On the one hand, I was offended that they were spending fabulous sums on my sister, and I had to fight for every scholarship and grant with my own efforts. On the other hand, this was what gave me another push not to give up. I thought, if they are sure that I am strong, then I will prove how strong I can be. And I began to draw up documents for grants, apply for all kinds of scholarships, look for vacancies for students in order to cover at least part of the expenses myself. We both went to the same college, although we lived there in completely different ways. Hannah lived in a spacious room on campus. Her parents regularly sent her money for everything, from textbooks to clothes and entertainment. She hung out with classmates, went to parties, led a cheerful and carefree life. I found a modest room in a dorm, worked part-time in the library in the evenings, then sometimes worked there as a cleaner. I joined a small program where students could clean rooms for a fee. Sometimes I washed the floors in the hallways of the dorm, and I did all this at those hours when most of my classmates were resting. And in the breaks that I snatched from myself, I studied, read tons of literature on accounting, financial analysis, taxation. Even though I was terribly tired, I realized this is my only way to achieve something. No one will hand me what I want on a silver platter. My sister never noticed it. When we crossed paths in the cafeteria or on the playground in front of the building, she would say with a hint of pity, "You look tired, Rachel. Maybe you should manage your time better instead of running around everywhere." And I would smile back, trying not to show any resentment or anger because I understood this was my decision. I chose this path, and an inner voice would say, "Hang in there, Rachel. You have everything ahead of you." Several semesters passed. I gradually settled in, realized that in addition to my main studies, I needed to think about my career in advance. So I went to various internships. I got into a local audit firm where, albeit formally, I was on duty. I brought coffee, copied documents, helped sort papers. In return, I received invaluable experience of immersion in the real sphere. Gradually, they began to allow me to do small tasks that required certain skills. I happily took on everything. Many students from our college not only did not try to get a job there, they simply thought it was impossible because such interns are usually taken from more famous universities. But I knocked on doors asking for a chance, and I was lucky. When my first summer in college ended, I learned about the opportunity to study fast and take some of the CPA exams early. I realized that if I worked like a horse, I could pass some of the exams before graduation. And again, no one around me believed that this was possible for a regular student, but I was confident in myself. I had the strength. Around the same time, I met Professor McLaughlin at an elective. He taught an additional course on international financial reporting standards. I signed up for it, although the course was difficult and very extensive. On the first day of classes, he came up to me after the lecture and asked, "Rachel, you have quite a strong base. Where did you study before?" "Well, not really anywhere in particular. I just read a lot, study, try to figure it out." "Do you like accounting?" "Yes, very much. I believe that order in numbers creates order in both business and in minds." What a surprising formulation. He smiled. "I'm looking for an assistant who could help me prepare materials, sometimes check students' work. If you're interested, let me know." Of course I'm interested. I'll be very happy. Euphoric with this new opportunity, I went back to my room and happily called my mother. I was still hoping that some praise would break through their usual cold approval, but my mother responded, "Well, that's good, Rachel. But Hannah told me that she was invited to a party at a professor's country house, and there will be a lot of high society people there. So she has her own pride. You're both doing well." I sighed heavily. The situation was like this. I was an assistant to an accounting professor, and my sister was going to a party. But for Mom and Dad, it was an equal success. Perhaps it will always be like this for them. One evening, while I was sitting in the library until closing time, I received an email. The subject line was Benjamin Ford's scholarship information letter. I opened it, not immediately understanding what it was about. It turned out to be a national program, very prestigious in the field of accounting. Each year, it is awarded to only 5 students in the entire country. The requirements are strict, excellent academic performance, outstanding extracurricular activities, leadership qualities, recommendations from professors, and a lot of other items. To be honest, I didn't even think about applying for this scholarship thinking that it was too high a standard. But Professor McLaughlin must have set my portfolio himself. He had a practice of recommending smart students without warning them, so that they wouldn't get nervous ahead of time. The email said that I was being invited to submit a formal application since the committee had been impressed by the preview of my achievements. I sat in shock, rereading it several times. And finally, I decided I have to try. I didn't tell my parents or Hannah about my intention. By that time, I had already learned my lesson, my aspirations, my victories, or my own business. They won't pay attention anyway or will consider it something insignificant. Why should I see their indifference once again? It took me several weeks to prepare for the competition. I had to submit all the documents, write an essay, complete several tasks, and submit recommendations. Professor McLaughlin helped me, gave me advice, checked the texts, and pointed out mistakes. I gave it my all. Then I sent the documents, and for several months, I just crossed it out of my mind. Work, study, internship, and preparing for the CPA exams filled my every day. I did not allow myself to relax for a minute. 3 months later, in the evening, after another shift at the library, I found a letter in the mail. Congratulations. You are one of 5 winners of the Benjamin Ford Scholarship. I reread these lines, experiencing a storm of emotions, joy, pride, disbelief, excitement, and most importantly, that quiet voice inside me suddenly turned on, saying, "You see, Rachel, you can do it. You did it." I closed my eyes and almost cried from the feelings that overwhelmed me. For the first time, I realized that now no one would be able to ignore me. Although this sounds a little arrogant, this is exactly what I wanted my whole life to be noticed. But inside, I was not only proud, there was also wariness. What about my parents? How will they react? Will they even want to congratulate me now? The awards ceremony was announced in advance. It was to be held at one of the leading universities where representatives of large auditing firms, investors, journalists, and teachers from all over the country were coming. I was asked to take my parents with me. This will be a special day for them. They will be able to see what you have achieved, the organizer said over the phone. I admit I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to invite them because I was afraid of another cold statement or underestimation, but the other part, the stubborn inner child, still hoped to receive at least a drop of pride from them, and so I dialed the home number. "Hi, Mom. Remember how I told you I was entering this big competition?" Something like that. "Yeah, what's it all about?" "Anyway, I won one of the most prestigious national scholarships in accounting. I'm invited to the awards ceremony, and they're asking me to bring my parents." "Really?" I heard Mom raise her voice and call out to Dad. "Charles, come here." Rachel saying something about an award. I picked up the phone again. "When's the ceremony?" "In 2 weeks, Friday." "In the morning?" "It's in a different city, but I'll check with you to see what's most convenient for you." "They want to see you there." "Okay, we'll try to make it." Mom spoke in a tone as if she wasn't sure whether it was really worth the time. I hung up the phone feeling empty. Okay, I told myself. Even if they come, let them see it with their own eyes. Maybe then something will change, but I no longer had the same childish hope. I had become more hardened by this point. The day of the awards ceremony arrived. I arrived at the university early, put on my only more or less formal dress, modest, classic cut, black, with discreet accessories. The guys, the other laureates, were bustling around. We were all a little nervous. We were led into the hall where the ceremony was to take place, explained that each name would be announced, director of the university would count the short achievements and present the award. We all took our places in the front rows, the hall filled with guests, and I noticed that Hannah was sitting next to her parents. My sister was wearing an expensive dress with a chic handbag on her lap. Mom and Dad looked a little confused as if they themselves did not understand what they were doing in such a hall. I tried not to meet their eyes so as not to be distracted. I was ready for the most important moment in my life. Finally, the ceremony began. The host announced one laureate after another. Vivid biographies were heard. Someone created a program for optimizing tax accounting. Someone distinguished himself with student projects at the international level. I applauded everyone, trying to contain my excitement. And then it was my turn. The rector stood up and said, "The next student, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of resilience, discipline, and independence." Without financial support from her family, she went from being a cleaner and a librarian to being one of the best in her class. Her teachers call her a person of iron will and determination. Meet Rachel Moore. The audience burst into applause, and I heard several people stand up. I stood up from my seat, feeling a wave of heat spreading through my body. I was walking toward the stage, and at that moment, I turned to the audience and saw my parents' faces. Mom was sitting with a cold expression, and I didn't see the usual pride in her eyes. Dad seemed surprised, as if he hadn't expected everything to be so serious. Hannah looked at me with bewilderment, mixed as it seemed to me, with some envy. And then I realized they really were seeing me as if for the first time. I went up on stage, the rector shook my hand, presented me with an award, and briefly congratulated me. Then we took a photo, and I returned to my seat to the general lively jubilation. I felt as if fate had finally repaid me for all those years when I was ignored. After the ceremony, not only Professor McLaughlin, but also other professors and representatives of large companies approached me. They congratulated me, handed me business cards, asked if I was interested in an internship at their companies. I smiled and quietly rejoiced. Here it is, the reward for hard work. And suddenly I saw the rector, who also came up to me and whispered in my ear, "You have proven that family is not always the one who helps. Sometimes family is yourself. Don't forget that now all doors are open for you." I nodded, thanked him, and then I noticed my parents and Hannah walking towards me. I saw them, sighed, and mentally prepared myself for another cold conversation. "Rachel," Mom said, trying to smile. "Congratulations, you're great, I guess. But why didn't you tell me it was that serious? Have you ever listened?" I answered simply. I thought there was little aggression in my words, more weariness and release from years of expectation. Mom frowned, and Dad started to say something. "We always believed that you were capable of so many things, but we didn't know that you needed help. We thought you could handle it yourself." "You never asked if I needed help," I said. "It suited you to think that Rachel can do anything. But, sometimes I wanted someone to support me too." "Well?" Mom looked at Hannah, confused. She stood silently looking from me to my parents. Then Hannah tried to interject, "Listen, Rachel, I didn't know you were applying for this scholarship. I thought your college was paid for too." "Really?" I looked into her eyes. "Have you ever wondered how I pay for my studies and rent? Has it ever occurred to you that you and I live different lives?" Hannah made a helpless gesture. "I guess I was too busy with my own life." "Exactly, and you were all fine with it. However, I don't want to sort things out now. I don't need your approval anymore." I turned my back to them. Usually in such scenes in books, the main character starts crying, but I was calmer than ever. So many emotions were boiling inside me, but they were not about my family. They were about me. It suddenly became clear to me. This is the moment when I finally stopped trying to achieve their love, stopped cherishing this childhood dream. Someday, they will see how good I am. That evening, the university held a small reception in honor of the awardees. Investors, teachers, students, and some parents came. Mine stayed, too. I only crossed paths with them by chance at the refreshment table. One of the future employers, a representative of a large auditing firm, came up and said, "Miss Moore, we'd like to discuss a possible job offer. We're impressed with your accomplishments and references. Can you come to our table?" I saw my family at the other end of the room. Mom, Dad, and Hannah were standing there embarrassed, looking in my direction, but not daring to approach, and I went to the table with investors. And we began to talk animatedly about the future, that I might be offered a starting position as a junior auditor in the New York office. That was my goal, to break into a big city, into a cool office, and engage in real audit practice. The next day, there was a scholarship dinner for the recipients, and my parents decided to attend. At dinner, my mother tried to start a conversation. "Rachel, we know we may not have been the most thoughtful parents, but we really do love you, and Hannah equally. Maybe we just haven't had our priorities straight. It's not about love, Mom. It's about how I've always felt like I had to earn your praise, while Hannah always got it by default. I tried and I tried, but you didn't see it. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm no longer used to asking." Dad sighed and extended his hand as if he wanted to pat me on the shoulder. "Forgive us, daughter. We didn't notice that you were suffering so much. I don't want to quarrel now. Just accept that everything is different now. I'm not offended. I'm just making a choice in my own favor." Hannah sat a little to the side, fiddling with her napkin. Occasionally, she glanced up at me as if she couldn't believe that I was the same quiet Rachel who always got the short end of the stick. I saw confusion in her eyes and a hint of envy, because now I was the center of attention in the room where she had always thought she belonged, and she clearly didn't like it. A week after the ceremony, I finally accepted the offer from the New York office. Another large firm was calling me to Chicago, another to Los Angeles. But I settled on New York. I was attracted by the pace of the big city and the opportunity to grow faster in a tough environment. I continued to slowly pack my things, preparing to move after the end of the semester. Since then, my relationship with my family has been reduced to almost nothing. Sometimes we call each other, but these are polite, short conversations like, "How are things at work?" "Great. I have a project here." "Okay. Well, we are happy," and that's it. Mom and Dad tried to somehow establish communication, but to be honest, I no longer felt the need to prove anything to them. Hannah wrote me a couple of messages, though not to congratulate me or acknowledge my achievements, but to complain that her parents began to demand more independence from her because they look at me and see that a student can be independent. And I found this a little funny. It turns out that my example stirred up their usual world, and Hannah suddenly found it difficult to live up to their previous expectations. I will always remember that moment in the hall when the rector called my name and how everyone turned to look at me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and acknowledged, and I achieved this on my own without money, without favors, without anyone's special favor. This feeling gives me the strength to move forward even now when I already work for a large company and periodically hear about new challenges. But no challenge seems more frightening to me than the years I lived in the shadow of my own sister, trying to get the attention of those who did not consider me a real daughter. Now that I look at my life, I know for sure, sometimes you just stop asking for love and decide to love yourself. This doesn't mean that I've become callous or bitter. On the contrary, I feel great inner peace and confidence. I'm ready to help other people who may also lack family support. I'd like to tell them that everything is possible if you have the will, goals, and faith in yourself. Everything is possible. Even if as a child, you were told 100 times that you're smart, you'll figure it out yourself, and were given no help. Strength comes from our wounds and mistakes, and the love we didn't receive is sometimes the engine that allows us to achieve great heights. When I graduated and officially received my diploma, my parents did not come to the ceremony. Apparently, they had something to do, and my mother said, "You can manage without us, right?" I smiled and said, "Yes, of course, I can." A week later, my grandmother called me, the same one who had always been kind to me. She said, "I'm proud of you, Rachel. You are a wonderful granddaughter. I wish I could be there with you, but you know I'm always there in spirit." I almost cried when she said that because I realized that I wanted her to be the one to see me go up on stage to receive my diploma, to stand there, happier than I had ever been. But she was already old, and the journey would have been difficult for her. But her call was the warmest moment of that day, and I was immensely grateful to her. I remember a couple of months after graduation, I was packing my bags for New York when Hannah walked into the room. She had decided to see me, had driven to campus in her car. I was surprised because she hadn't been there for a long time. She came in, sat on the edge of my bed, and tried to start a conversation. "Rachel, maybe you don't want to, well, go so far away? Our parents want us to be close." "Hannah," I answered calmly. "My parents never cared what I did. Now they suddenly want me to be close? Sorry, but I have my own path. I'm just afraid that we won't talk anymore," Hannah muttered, picking at the edge of her pillow with her fingernail. "We haven't really talked much anyway, Hannah, and you know it." She lowered her eyes and stood up, sighing heavily. Then I saw a kind of childish confusion on her face. For the first time in my life, I felt that my sister was unsure of herself. Maybe she realized that all this time her well-being was based only on the fact that her parents nurtured her as the favorite. And now it turned out that I had broken ahead, was getting brilliant offers, and she was just finishing college, not really knowing what she wanted to do next. "Good luck to you, Rachel," she said finally and left the room. I looked at the closed door for a few more seconds, experiencing a strange feeling. It was not anger, and it was not contempt. Rather, it was a quiet sadness. Once we were little girls, twins who could laugh together and not think about who was born 4 minutes earlier or later. But life turned out in such a way that we were raised differently, and we ourselves became very different. I could no longer return to that childish unconscious feeling of we are one. Now we are strangers who crossed paths in the same family. In New York, I plunged into a frantic work rhythm. At first, it was difficult. I spent 10 to 12 hours at work preparing reports, learning new things, communicating with clients, learning new programs, mastering the nuances of auditing, but I enjoyed it. I liked being in the thick of things, solving complex problems every day. I was confidently building a career, and I no longer waited for my mom or dad to praise me for another achievement. Why'd I need this? I myself saw the fruits of my labor. Sometimes when the weekends came, I would walk the streets of Manhattan, look at the skyscrapers, and think about how strange life can turn out. If my parents had supported me as much as Hannah, would I have become so resilient, stubborn, ambitious? Maybe not. I am grateful that fate did not give me an easy path. It made me stronger and helped me understand that the most valuable recognition is the one you give to yourself. Several years have passed. I have managed to finish my studies, gain experience, and get a promotion. My parents, of course, periodically try to keep in touch. They send messages like, "How are you doing, daughter? It's a shame you don't come." And I only briefly reply, "Everything is fine. Thank you." Hannah pops up on social media every now and then, posting photos from parties, and then writes me rare letters, complaining that she is having a hard time finding a job. I advise her, send your resume to different places, take courses, improve your skills. She is indignant. I find all this so boring. Apparently, our paths really have finally diverged, but I don't regret that we hardly communicate. It doesn't mean that I hate them or despise them. It's just that one day you stop begging for love and start choosing yourself.